coming today, taking the time out to come and hear more about rare disease. My name is Kerry Hughes, and I'm the founder of Harmony for Hope. We're a 501c3 charity organization, and our vision is to create community for rare disease through something we all have in common, which is music. And so bear with me, because I know that seems like it's a little out there right now, but you'll get the idea as we move along. And I want to give a special thanks today to our program sponsors at Retrophin Pharmaceutical, and we'll go ahead and get started. Meet the inspiration to our foundation. Bridget Kennicott used to be able to run fast, hug tightly, sing and dance until 2009, when she was diagnosed with late infantile Batten disease. How many of you have heard of late infantile Batten disease? Okay, well, I'm glad you're here today. Thank you so much. Over time, affected children suffer mental impairment, seizures, and progressive loss of sight and motor skills, and eventually children with Batten disease become blind, bedridden, and unable to communicate, and Batten disease is presently always fatal. Sadly, Bridget lost her battle with Batten disease on February 15th this year, but all the more reason for our mission to continue to share stories of diseases like this with people like you who are dedicating their lives to medicine. So let's take a brief look at rare disease by the numbers. A disease is defined as rare when it affects 200,000 people or fewer. There are 350 million people worldwide that are collectively impacted by 7,000 rare diseases. That's more than AIDS and cancer combined. Half of these people are children, and 50% of these diseases do not have a foundation supporting them or researching their disease. Bridget was able to stay somewhat connected to the world around her through music, and I have a personal love of music, so music naturally became a platform for our mission. In 2011, we set out to unite people through high-energy live music events, and we directed our proceeds to scientific discoveries in rare disease here at Rush University, supporting Dr. Pahan's research, and Dr. Pahan is here with us today. Hi, Dr. Pahan. So our mission has evolved since then, not only to support science, but we also like to keep children like Bridget at the heart of our mission, and to amplify the voices of patients and parent advocates. So our three-pronged mission is designed to support this end. Our Rock the Research events fuel scientific discoveries. Our Play This Forward program uplifts children through gifts of music that we deliver. And the reason that we're here today, our Rare Storytellers, is to educate future generations of physicians through this program, because rare disease really isn't so rare. Here's some pictures of some children that we've delivered music to over the years. We've partnered with La Rabida here in Chicago, and we've partnered with several foundations nationwide and delivered repurposed iPods, music gift cards. We create a Harmony for Hope playlist every year of inspirational songs that we make available to these kids. So that's our Play This Forward program. And here's a glimpse at our Rock the Research events. And this is how we are fueling scientific discoveries in rare disease. And to date, we've been able to give $20,000 to that cause. So something that the Harmony for Hope team is really proud of, because we're pretty grassroots. So with that, the reason that we're here today is because I want to share with you our growing educational part of our mission, which is called Rare Storytellers, and the purpose is to put faces behind the numbers and faces behind the stories and communicate to you that these are real people living with diseases that have limited treatment options, sometimes no cures. And so our hope today is that we inspire you. And our two speakers are going to be Sharon Rose, she's going to talk to us today, and Sue Rogers. And just something a little bit inspirational. So today our worlds have collided. We've come together. We're charity, pharmaceutical, students, patients, dedicated advocates, and dedicated scientists. And we've become interconnected for the sake of rare disease. And we hope that you're inspired by today's event. And we think that our Rare Storytellers program definitely coincides with the Rush mission and vision of innovation, collaboration, respect, excellence, and above all, compassion. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Sharon Rose.
New to this microphone thing, so bear with me. Thank you for your time and having me here today, and thank you to Harmony for Hope and Rush University. It's a great opportunity. It's the first time that Klippel-Feil syndrome has really been explained publicly to a group from a patient. So it's an honor to be able to do that. So thank you, and I hope I don't bore you. I am an interior designer. I'm a right brainer. I studied art and architecture. In the past, I have designed hospital lobbies, pediatric and spine units. Medicine is not my arena. Over 7 years ago, on a fall rainy day, I sat in my car holding up an x-ray film of my neck. I was completely perplexed. I had never looked at an x-ray of a cervical spine, but I knew it was not supposed to look like that. A big block of bone, a large wing-looking bone shooting out of the back of my neck. As the raindrops slid down my windshield, I said aloud to myself, nobody is ever going to know about this. I was embarrassed. My shoulder and neck had been very stiff and painful. I thought if someone could just crack my neck, I would feel better. The chiropractor, who thankfully took the image before adjusting me, came flying back into the exam room. Before I was fully dressed, he said I needed to find a specialist. He had never seen anything like it. He could not help me, and I should go and take that x-ray. That night, I looked up fused neck bones online and came up with Klippel-Feil syndrome. There was little information available. My life was about to unravel. At the same time, the puzzle pieces were coming together. I thought back to lifelong issues. As a child, I refused to do a forward roll in tumbling class because I couldn't tuck my chin to my chest. It was probably a good thing. It was probably a good thing that I could not do gymnastics. My knees dislocated often. My hairline in the back is very low. I have abnormal posture. My head leans in one way and juts forward. My ears were always crackling, popping, or infected. I have a lazy right eye. I had a bad gallbladder that was removed at age 19. I continually have GI issues. I have a bleeding issue. I saw Dr. Valentino, a hematologist here at Rush. And every now and then, I would get a terrible headache. What is Klippel-Feil syndrome? KFS is diagnosed when 2 or more cervical vertebrae are congenitally fused. Keep in mind that the vertebrae are often malformed in a myriad of ways. The first unfused levels of our spine are hypermobile as our bodies attempt to compensate for those fusions. The genes linked to KFS are responsible for bone development and growth, causing bony abnormalities throughout the skeletal system, not just the spine. KFS is a musculoskeletal condition which is degenerative in nature, affecting joints, spinal cord, nerves, and muscles. KFS can cause congenital defects in the heart, kidneys, lungs, bladder, vision, hearing, and beyond. Conditions such as scoliosis, Sprengel's shoulder, Chiari malformation, tethered cord, and cervical dystonia may be present. KFS causes a wide range of unique and complex presentations, which cause a magnitude of issues. So, my first logical, oh, you know what, you guys? I'm not hitting the buttons. So, okay. Sorry. So, that's my neck. The fusions at the top. And then that's a picture of me as a baby. So we missed all that. That's, okay, so now we're on track. Is it possible to turn that on or do not? Thank you. I think it needs to be all of them, doesn't it? Are you good? Okay, thank you. Can you guys still see those crazy knees? Okay. My first logical step was to see my orthopedic knee surgeon. What? I have terribly deformed knees, trochlear dysplasia. The first time my knee surgeon saw my MRI, he said, well, your knees could not be much worse. My kneecaps sit on the outside of the usual joint. The joint itself, where the kneecap should sit within a groove, is a deformed bump of bone. I've had traumatic experiences with these knees, chronic pain since childhood, 4 knee surgeries, 1 major one after a last-ditch attempt at gymnastics, resulting in emergency surgery. I am 46, and knee replacement is up next. So I brought the x-ray to my trusted knee surgeon. He said, yes, it's KFS. C2, C3, and C4 are fused. It's incidental. He gave me steroids and said, put ice on it, you'll be fine. He made no connection to my knees. The big misnomer about Klippel-Feil syndrome is that it's just fused bones in the neck, that it's common, no big deal, and doesn't cause pain. Most physicians never see a KFS patient in their career. When a person is diagnosed, physicians often don't know the nature of KFS, the importance of testing organs, or the associated conditions to consider, because there's no protocol for KFS. Klippel-Feil syndrome hit me like a Mack truck. Over the coming months, I could not function as I once did. My symptoms include pain in the face, head, neck, shoulder, back, down my arms, muscle spasms, constant dizziness, shooting, zapping pain throughout these areas, along with numbness and tingling from the top of my head down through my arms and torso. My head is so constantly pressured and heavy. It's like a child-sized football helmet made of cement is jammed on my head and I can't get it off. The worst pain is in the occipital region and forehead. Fatigue. I can't handle noise or too much activity around me. Every time I ride in an elevator, bend forward, or turn my head left or right, the symptoms increase. And just to mention, just standing up here is not, it's, you know, you wouldn't know it, but it's a tough challenge for me, so if I grab onto this. When all of this first began, it was like flipping a switch. Everything was suddenly like tangled crossed wires, nerves and muscles gone wild. When I say the word pain from now on today, I mean all of the above. I began to miss a lot of work and social activities. I think I might have done it again. Yeah, I did. I I began to miss a lot of work and social activities. I tried to keep it together, but my body was having a meltdown. I would drive to work and then needed to be driven home by my boss early. Most days I came home in tears, pained and exhausted. I lost weight. My mom would coach me over the phone just to get a bowl of cereal and get in bed. I began to have issues with my hands. They are ice cold, weak, numb, and tingling. Chores didn't get done. At work, samples such as carpet, ceramic tile, furniture binders became heavy and cumbersome. Working on interiors projects was so frustrating. The things I love to do, my career, creating, became difficult. I had to start asking coworkers to do things for me. I couldn't accept that I needed help with these basic tasks. As I was trying to grasp KFS in the midst of pain, getting my needs across to physicians was a hurdle. I was met with disbelief rather than support. I searched for specialists, but nobody was taking me seriously because they didn't have knowledge of KFS or really the time to invest. The things I did try weren't working. In the next 5 years, I went to Chicago, Wisconsin, Iowa, Maryland, and Ohio. I called, emailed, searched, even faxed to see who might see me or look at my scans because something was wrong. I wasn't trying to make a career out of this or doctor shopping. I wanted to get back to normal. I'm in pain, a constant 911 signal that goes on ignored. At one point, I spent a month in Michigan. I was admitted to a head pain unit. My headache specialist had sent me there knowing that the issues in my neck caused pain, cervicogenic headache. As I left the hospital, the director said, "We failed you." But while I was there, I brought up KFS often. KFS was the elephant in the room. Why was the blaring issue ignored? Because Klippel-Feil syndrome is misunderstood. At appointments, I was dismissed repeatedly. I was told, KFS does not cause pain or your symptoms. To set the record straight, for the majority of us, Klippel-Feil syndrome causes chronic pain primarily in the upper body. Anyone who says otherwise is wrong. KFS often slips under the radar until issues begin. I have heard this same story countless times from patients and parents. They report the same symptoms. Some can't get the proper diagnosis of Klippel-Feil syndrome, and then we lack a path for treatment. Aside from pain care, x-rays, scans, and testing organs for congenital defects should be mandatory when congenital fusions in the neck are discovered. But rather than listen openly, the issues we experience are often invalidated. I wish more physicians would have empathy and believe that our concerns and symptoms are legitimate. To be denied our truth while seeking care causes desperation. To anyone who disputes the often debilitating symptoms, I say, please show me the data. Where did you get adequate patient data for a condition affecting 1 in 42 to 50,000 people before the internet? What group of patients stated that they don't have pain? How many people were asked? If KFS was so common, there might be financial support for research resulting in more accurate current information. Patients are the data. Adult patients must advocate for our own care repeatedly while in the thick of it, which exacerbates the problems. Adult rare patients must be treated with respect and inclusion. Our first-hand knowledge and experience is second to none. Everyone with a rare disease should be considered equal regardless of age. I'm thankful for researchers who have focused on KFS to shed light on our reality. However, we have a long way to go. Why is it so difficult to grasp that a lifelong musculoskeletal condition causing numerous deformities, namely in the spine, creates these symptoms? KFS affects posture, mobility, the spinal cord, nerves, muscles, and joints. As our faulty bodies try to do their job, pain sets in and leaves us debilitated. This is not far-fetched. Much is to be discovered about Klippel-Feil syndrome. We must work together. Rare patients can teach you more than a textbook or online search. Lack of research means lack of factual information, but this does not equate lack of symptoms or issues that need care. 3 years in, I contacted a neurosurgeon in Iowa. He agreed to see me and ordered new scans. The next day he said, "Your head feels heavy. You rest your head on your hand. You lean on walls. You've been told your pain is all in your head. Well, it literally is all in your head." And then he showed me that my skull is fused on the right side to C1. C1, the atlas, is deformed and in 2 pieces, bifid in the front and back. In Greek mythology, Atlas supported the weight of the world. No wonder my head feels so heavy. He said I have craniocervical instability, a structural instability and hypermobility of the cervical-cranial junction, which may lead to issues of the brainstem and upper spinal cord, causing neurological deficits. Then C2 through C4 are congenitally fused. C3 is partially missing. My ribs start at the wrong level. The craniocervical, 3 years, numerous scans, and a dozen specialists, and no one had caught this. The craniocervical junction is often overlooked. These types of deformities cause the symptoms I experience. Then, after wearing 3 different neck braces 24/7 for many months, he said that surgery for me was too risky, and if he wouldn't do it, nobody should do it. This left me devastated. I often describe pain as a silent scream, but that afternoon, down the hospital corridors, I could not contain myself. I wept openly, the realization that this pain would continue and I had no next step. So, I read that Ehlers-Danlos syndrome has a link to Klippel-Feil syndrome. My specialists agreed that Ehlers-Danlos was at play, hypermobility. My shoulder, my ribs, and jaw pop out of joint. EDS contributes to my dislocating knees. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a collagen deficiency. KFS affects bone development and growth, such as found in my neck and knees. Craniocervical instability is also related to EDS, and EDS is connected to my bleeding issue. Cervical dystonia is the culprit for the muscle spasms. For me, they are sustained contractions that feel like fire, tight, ripping, pulling muscles that you can't see. Cervical dystonia is common for KFS patients, but often undiagnosed. I could no longer work full-time or part-time. I pushed, but I couldn't support myself. I had exhausted all of my savings on medical care. I took a loan out of my 401k, and I could not pay it back. Rare conditions leave us financially and physically bankrupt. I applied for disability. I provided 3 letters from physicians and 1 from my employer. A year passed. I was denied. I took out another loan from my 401k. I thought I would lose my house. My neurologist was so annoyed that I was being denied that he sat down and wrote another letter. He stated that my condition is only going to get worse, and the fact that I was still working minimally was being used against me. Yes, I worked minimally during this entire time, and I still do. My employer has been unbelievably understanding. The day the judge heard my case after over 2 years, he said, "You are to be commended for the robust documentation provided." He went on to rattle off over 10 code numbers that confirmed why I have become disabled. 3 years ago, I had a CDF surgery as a preventative measure. C4-5 were surgically fused to repair a herniated disc, degeneration, and hypermobility. However, my last MRI was 2.5 years ago, and C5-6 is now listed as obliterated. Surgery does not fix KFS symptoms long term. You can't see pain. If you see me at work or at the grocery store, you would think I was fine. That's a facade. Patients do such a good job of hiding our suffering that we don't get the care that we need. I'm upbeat, I joke, I laugh. One of my pain management specialists said it was only a matter of time until you would have chronic pain. Even in the dead of night, that 911 siren of pain continues. I've had to sacrifice and navigate life differently. People can't understand how a condition doesn't have effective treatments and why I am not better. There's no fix for KFS. It must be managed for a lifetime. Kerry is going to hand you a box of skeleton keys. Please take one and pass them on. And there's also a handout in that middle folder. If you can take a handout and pass them on, I'll get to that in a minute. There's a document online about craniocervical abnormalities and the associated symptoms. The document states that this does not apply to Klippel-Feil syndrome. This is incorrect. The misconception is that our fused vertebrae are perfect in shape and form, stacked up neatly like Legos, that everything else around those fusions is unaffected and functioning normally. Our necks are like bone salad, different kinds of salad. No two of us are alike. I reached out to the physician listed on that document, and I respectfully expressed that our patients also experience these symptoms. Let's just say that I was met with the dismissal and attitude that Klippel-Feil syndrome patients are met with time and time again. On the flip side, I was contacted by Genetic Alliance. They were working on the NIH Office of Rare Disease Research to update the online KFS information for the NIH National Library of Medicine. They asked me to take a look at it. Now we're getting somewhere. They wanted my input. I provided documentation for everything that I requested to have added or edited, and they revised it. I have built a team of physicians who have been willing to work with me because these symptoms make sense. I see a headache specialist, a neurologist, a pain management anesthesiologist, and a therapist whose focus is neuropsychology. I use various treatments and I continue to pursue new ones, but this pain goes on unmanaged. You name it, I've tried it. Once KFS patients find physicians who believe us, we don't have effective treatments. If you know of a neurosurgeon who is kind and skilled regarding the craniocervical junction, who will monitor me, I'm hiring. 7 years ago, I was one of several lost people online trying to make sense of Klippel-Feil syndrome. An advocate was born. I began a Facebook page to educate and empower KFS patients, families, and physicians alike. I founded Klippel-Feil Syndrome Freedom. With community input and help, I've built a central location with information. We're leading the way with 3 peer support groups. The Skeleton Key. 12 years ago, I moved into my older home, and there was an old rusty coffee can filled with skeleton keys that went unignored in my basement. I began photographing the keys for some reason, and I was sharing the photographs with KFS information on Facebook and Twitter. Now, the skeleton key is known as the symbol of hope for a rare skeletal disease. People all over the world use skeleton keys as a symbol of freedom to open doors for Klippel-Feil syndrome. May your key remind you of Klippel-Feil syndrome. Rare patients are the story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon,
Thank
for sharing
you.
your story.
Sorry about the
You did great. Takes a lot of courage to do that, so thank you.
Thanks, guys. Did anyone fall asleep?
And next, I would like to introduce Sue Rogers, who's going to share her story about her son. And before she speaks, we're going to share a video with you about Sue.
I don't know how loud this is going to be, so sorry for what you're hearing.
talked after that. I forgot how tearful I get when I watched it. August 9th, 2014, when my son was 2 years old. It's a day that I'll never forget. He woke up in the morning, and I noticed that his eyelids were swollen. It was August. We had spent a lot of time outside. I thought he probably got bitten by bugs or ate something, he had an allergic reaction. So we took him to the pediatrician because still thinking that it was allergies, I just had an uneasy feeling in my stomach. When we walked into the pediatrician's office, she took one look at him. Yes, it looks like allergies. She went and gathered several sample bottles of Benadryl, went over the doses of it, and sent us on our way. And I still remember I was reaching for the door, the doorknob. She came running out, and she's like, wait a second, I want to check one more thing. And I don't know what it was that made her stop us, but I will forever be grateful. She said, I want to check his urine. He was only 2 years old at the time. He was still in diapers, so we put a bag on him, sent us home, waited for that urine. He peed, brought the urine bag back to the doctor's office. She took it in the back. And she came out and she said, his protein levels are off the chart. I want you to go over to the hospital, go for some blood tests. So we did that, went back home, proceeded on with our day. In my mind, I'm still thinking, this is allergies, it's nothing else. He's 2 years old, what could possibly be wrong with him? He was born healthy, there's nothing wrong with my child. And that night, as I'm pulling the dishes out in the kitchen to start making dinner, I get the phone call. And it was the pediatrician herself. And she said, I just got the lab results back, and he needs to be admitted to the intensive care unit immediately, get him over to the hospital. We spent the next several days in the hospital. He was getting albumin infusions and IV Lasix in between. And it was over those next few days that I realized how much extra fluid his body had been gradually putting on. Unfortunately, this was during a time when we didn't have smartphones. So all of that time that I was spending in the hospital was just all these thoughts. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to do. I have no idea. And now I think, gosh, if I had the smartphone, if I had the Wi-Fi capabilities, then maybe things would have been easier to handle, maybe not. He was in and out of the hospital so many times over those next few months. We, of course, tried the steroids first. That was the first line of treatment. After a couple weeks of that not working, he went for the kidney biopsy. When they did the biopsy, it came back showing that he had signs of focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, which is a type of nephrotic syndrome. Basically, it's his own body, his own immune system, not recognizing his kidneys as his own, and attacking his kidneys. I started doing tons of research, and there was limited stuff out there on the internet, but everything pretty much was the same thing. Steroids is always the first thing we do, then Cytoxin, then Celsa, then cyclosporin was the same thing. So heading back into the doctor's office, he said, well, it's time to start the Cytoxin, which is a chemo medication. And in my mind, I'm thinking, why on earth am I giving a chemo drug to my child here? He reassured me. He's like, don't worry, the dose is a lot less than if it was, if he actually had cancer. And 12 weeks of this may take care of it. He may not have any more problems. So I trusted him. We tried the Cytoxin. Granted, him saying, well, because it's a much smaller dose, he's not going to lose his hair, he's not going to have all the side effects of the chemo. He was waking up in the morning with clumps of hair on his pillow. And once it got to the point where there was more clumps or bald spots on his head, I just shaved his head because it was horrifying to look at. He had horrible nausea and vomiting. We were still trying to get rid of the extra fluid with diuretics. And one morning I woke up and surprisingly he wasn't awake yet. And kind of in my mind I'm thinking, yes, I could finally get dressed without a 2-year-old hanging on my leg. So I went and got dressed, and then I come back into the room and he still wasn't awake. And something's not right. I tried to wake him up and he wouldn't even stir. I rushed him to the emergency room, and I still remember the emergency room doctor telling me that we're lucky that he's still alive. because of the nausea and vomiting he was having and still giving him all the diuretics to try and decrease the swelling, his potassium level was critically low. So he spent a great deal of time in the hospital again. During that time, he developed the GI condition C. diff. His body was just wiped of everything. And then shortly after that, he also needed a blood transfusion. Once we got past that, we're like, okay, what's the next thing? Steroids didn't work, Cytoxin didn't work, it was the CellCept. CellCept, same thing. Now, all during this time, I kept monitoring him at home. The doctors wanted me to check his protein in his urine every single morning, so we had the dipsticks that we were checking. He wanted us to check his weight to see how far off of his dry weight we were getting. And I kept it all in my notebook. And as we were going through the different medications, I'm seeing no change in the protein. He's still putting on fluid. So after the CellCept, which didn't work, caused him horrible stomach problems, we went on to the cyclosporin. In all the research that I did, I realized that that really short list that they had of medications of this is what we're going to try. There's no cure, but this is what we're going to try. That list was getting shorter and shorter as we were reaching the bottom of it. The cyclosporin he started, side effects weren't too bad, but his creatinine started climbing. The doctor ordered another biopsy. We realized that the cyclosporin was being nephrotoxic to him. He had more damage from the cyclosporin itself than from the focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. At that time, we did switch nephrologists. We needed to get some other answers, some more opinions. And they said, well, let's try one more medication. Last thing on the list, let's try the Prograf. But there's a chance that that's going to be nephrotoxic too. During all this time, they kept him on the steroids. And during all that time, every time I brought him back to the doctor's office, I saw that wonderful growth curve that they have for the little kids. He's growing further and further down from where he should be. And I knew it was from the steroids. His growth was just not happening. So as we're with a new nephrologist, and he's starting on Simon's Prograf, I'm telling him, I said, he's been on steroids for so long now. I'm like, please, let us stop the steroids. It's not doing him any good. Well, with such limited research in FSGS, he's saying, well, you know, we have all these other medications, but we feel that it's best to do it in conjunction with the steroids, rather than in replacement of the steroids. And here I am. I brought this binder because I was the mom that brought this binder to every single doctor's appointment. And let me tell you, when the doctor saw me, he would roll his eyes and he'd be like, oh, God, not the binder again. And I would flip it open and I'd say, look, I've been watching his protein levels, and no matter what we do with the steroids, his protein levels go up and down regardless of the medication. And I said the steroids are causing him bone problems. He had a bone fracture. After that, they did a bone scan and saw that, that his bones were brittle, his height wasn't there, and which I know is just a physical, attribute, but still, when you have a little kid that you know has this thing, you want them to try and look as normal as possible. Not to mention that his hair growth with the steroids was ridiculous. But I argued with the doctor for 3 years. Every single time we went to the office, I said, we keep going up and down on the steroids, it's not doing anything. It's giving him horrible side effects. And let me tell you that other parents in my support group, we call kids on steroids roid rage for a reason. And finally, I think he just got tired of me nagging at him, that he finally said, okay, fine, we'll stop the steroids. There was no change. He never went into remission. Nothing got worse. He just continued on the same path. And I have to say that I think it took another 5 or 6 years before that nephrologist looked at me and said, I have to say it, you were right. And I didn't need that validation. And yes, at any time during that process, I could have gone home and said, you know what, here are all your medications, I'm not giving you the steroids. But I felt I needed that relationship with his doctor. I wanted him to continue to trust me, and I wanted to do what he was instructing me to do. But at the same time, I was my child's advocate. I did not see any good coming from that medication. I tried to show him all the proof that I had, and I'm glad that he did finally listen to me. And I guess the one thing that I want to bring to you too is when you see a patient or a parent walk in with the horrible binder, this is more for our sanity. I have never felt so helpless as a mother as I have since my son's been diagnosed. There's nothing I can do to protect him. Me writing down every single lab test, keeping notes from all of his hospitalizations, every single doctor's visit, is helping me keep my sanity. It's not to come back and to argue with doctors and saying this is what I want. It's me just doing what I need to do to stay above water right now. So for now, his life consists of 19 medications every day. He's not in remission. He's had a third biopsy this past year that's showing severe damage from focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. And his nephrologist has said that a transplant is inevitable. The frustrating thing is that we don't know when. It seems like since the beginning, everything is, we're gonna try this and it's a wait and see. And it's hard because I'm a planner. I like having things in my binder. And for them to say, well, he is going to need a transplant. We don't know if it's going to be in a year or in 2 years or somewhere down the road. So it's just another thing that we have no control over that adds to our frustration. He handles it pretty well. Unfortunately, I mean, at the age of 2, all of this started. So him going now for blood tests every 2 to 3 months, he doesn't even think anything of it. I try and give him as much ownership in it as possible. I give him choices. Okay, would you like your blood test on Saturday or Sunday? And he doesn't even argue with me. He's like, yeah, let's go for Saturday. Okay. So he handles it so much better than any adult I can imagine. It's frustrating because, in a sense, you can't see his disease. He doesn't wear his kidneys on the outside. So people look at him and they're like, well, there's nothing wrong with him. He looks fine. And I constantly get the, oh, he's had it since a young age. I'm sure he'll outgrow it. Not gonna happen. Or once you riddle out, because we call it FSGS, and people are like, oh, what does that stand for? And you say focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. They're like, oh, well, is it cancer? No. Oh, okay, then he's fine. And not to undermine cancer, my own mom died of liver cancer 10 years ago, so I know it's a really serious thing. But when you have somebody with a rare disease and you tell people the name of it and they don't know what it is, in their minds thinking, well, if it's not cancer, it's gonna be okay. And sometimes it's not. We go through a lot of struggles, a lot of challenges, a lot of hospitalizations, plenty of blood tests. So it's been a tough life. I think ultimately it has made us stronger and we have learned from it. And I'm excited to say that actually one of the physicians here, Dr. Reiser, is currently leading research in FSGS, and I don't know if anybody's heard about, I guess he published a paper recently on the SUPAR. So it's amazing stuff and very hopeful in that we are close to finding a cure. Because FSGS, the way it works is it will attack your kidneys. The transplant is not a cure because many times the FSGS just turns around and attacks the transplanted kidneys as well. There was a story in the paper maybe a couple years ago, I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, about a young man who was in his 20s who got a donated kidney from his sister. Just hours after he got her donated kidney, they did tests and saw that FSGS was attacking the new kidney. And he asked the doctors to remove that kidney before it got damaged and to give that kidney to somebody else who needed a transplant. Never before had it been done, and they decided to take a chance. And that other person who got that kidney is doing fine. That FSGS never showed its face again. The gentleman, I have met him a couple times at some of our fundraisers, and I know last time I saw him, he was still undergoing dialysis. But it's scary to think that even when the time comes that my son will need the transplant, and hopefully I'll be able to give him one of my kidneys, we don't know that that's the end of the story. It might be a lifelong, struggle for him. Among the different problems that he has, the nephrotic syndrome has given him high blood pressure, so he's on meds for that. Because his albumin levels drop so much, because the protein is being spilled into his urine, his liver tries to overcompensate, causing his cholesterol levels to go up. So great having a 2-year-old on cholesterol medication. Then he has his immunosuppressants, he has his diuretics. Then because of the immunosuppressants, he has to be on antibiotics 3 times a week to make sure he doesn't get pneumonia. His electrolytes are off. So it's scary that 2 little kidneys in your body can wreak such havoc. I have to say that this video was one that I think it was probably like the 5th one that I've made. For me, it's therapeutic. It gives me a voice, helps educate other people out there. I appreciate you all coming and taking time to watch that, listen to myself and Sharon, and hopefully you learned something today. Thank you.
Before you wondering who I am, I'm Mike Linsky. I'm with the Harmony for Hope team, and we thank again Sharon and Sue for the great and heartfelt discussions. We'd like to open up the floor for a couple of questions. If you guys have, got you here, we got a couple more minutes. Any questions for either Sharon or Sue on topics today? Go ahead.
You both kind of touched on it. Thank you for sharing. But if there's one thing that healthcare providers can do to make your experience in any way more comfortable or personal, what is it that we as physicians in training can take going forward?
Part of it would be, I guess, not judging us when you do see us come in with our artillery of information, and giving us a starting point. Once you are introduced with something rare, you really don't know where to start with your research. And as we probably all know, Dr. Google isn't always accurate. You find some good information, you find some bad information. But one of the helpful things that one of our doctors did was actually get in touch with another family who had a daughter with the same condition. And just being able to network, I think was trivial to us.
That's a loaded question. I think it's so tough when you come in and you're a complex patient, and I have to go to, sometimes I have 6, 7 specialists, and so one thing feeds into the next, and as a physician you got 10 minutes, and so it's so difficult to try, I always come in, I have a note card, these are my goals that I want to leave with, and most of the time the time in the office is so small, and if we can just have one idea, or I'll say, think about it. Just think, if you could be at home on a Sunday, I don't care, but think about my head. What could we do with it? And that you would really spend that time and think of that patient who doesn't have another option. I've tried, you name it, and we're at a standstill. So my thing to doctors is always, please think outside of the box. And if you have an idea or you talk to a colleague, let me know. I just want to feel better, and we know this is going on and it's not operable. So when I leave an office and I have nothing, or the doctor is, kind of like, okay, see you next time. And we've, one of my doctors we talked about, he has goats on this farm, and we have nothing else. So he's like, let's talk about the goats. And I'm like, I'm not here for goats. I need help now. And so I'm always really like, come on, we have 10 minutes. What can we accomplish? What can you think of? And if you don't think of it now, let me know, and I'll come back, and let's give me something. So I don't know if that answers you.
How hard did you find that transition? I imagine you both, yours is maybe a little bit more acute, but I would imagine you went to a general physician at the start, and then you started getting involved with specialists. I mean, was that an easy transition for your physicians at the time, like saying, I can't help you, here's the next one, here's the next one?
Well,
sounded frustration, which we all get, we would understand.
Yeah, well, I started with my knee surgeon, who said, he's like, I'm knees, I'm not head. And so then I had to kind of go back online, and at that time, the support groups were like message boards, so I would put out a message like, okay, I got this problem going on, who do I see? And I had no clue of what specialist, and then I would get little responses here and there, and that's why now with having, I know it sounds so funny, Facebook is social, but for me and for my group of Klippel-Feil syndrome families and patients, we go there to say, hey, this is going on. Who do I see? Do I see a neurosurgeon? Do I see a pain management? And then we can get feedback from each other on what specialist to see. Or you say, like for me, okay, I have cranial instability. Who do I see? And there's only like 5 guys in the United States that do that. And I've seen 3 of them, and they all are like, get out of here. I don't want to mess with you if he didn't want to mess with you. So you have to build it on your own.
Build a network, essentially.
Yeah. And they often don't have time to work together. So you really have to kind of go, okay, this doctor, here's what he said. And you go to the next guy and say, what do you think about this? And you have to be the coordinator.
Exactly. So looking forward then, and treatments for the conditions, what's out there?
Well, for us, Prograf was the last medication for us to try.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's really just watching his kidney function slowly decline until a transplant comes.
Then with in the pipeline of research and development, you mentioned something about the
Dr. Reiser and his CPAR, yes.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to come soon enough for us, unfortunately, but we're very excited to see it as a possibility of saving kidneys for people down the road. But again, if you've heard of the research, if you know Dr. Reiser, a brilliant man, and the research is just amazing.
Mike, if I could too. So I'm from Retrophin. I work in patient advocacy. Just lovely hearing from both of you today. Thank you. But we actually do also have a phase 3 asset called sparsentan. So that's, there are, some things that are hopefully coming down the pipeline, but more information can be found through our website too if you're interested for FSGS.
Okay, I think we're just about out of time. Deliver you with 5 seconds to go. And again, on behalf of Kerry and our speakers, thank you so much for coming today.